Hi again, everybody. I'm Jamie Allison, and this is the Big Idea, Big Moves podcast. This is the destination for high performers. We talk to people with from different genres, different niches, just people doing really cool things in their space. And so we talk to CEOs, athletes, lots of entrepreneurs, just people, again, doing interesting things that we can take bits and pieces away from their journey or their expertise and apply them into our own lives as well. So we have one of those today. Just before we jump into that, if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you know that we are sponsored by Thirdzy, and Thirdzy creates natural products that help athletes. A lot of CrossFitters and people like that use this, as well as just high performers wanting high quality rest and recovery. Their recovery collagen is melatonin free, it's sedative free, and helps you get good quality rest while supporting muscle and joint recovery at the same time. So you can check it out to see if it's something that you'd be interested in. If you go through our Instagram profile, you can see there's a code for 20% off in there. It's BIBM20, or go directly to thirdzy.com and check it out for yourself. So really excited to have Shannon Sperber with us today. She holds a Doctor of Physical Therapy degree, is Heart Math certified, and a licensed Somatic Breathwork facilitator, which is some really interesting stuff. I know lots of people in our audience will be interested in that. Her passion is helping people clear mental and physical blockages, and by using their breath, they can show up as a kind of true, authentic self with more purpose, clarity, and alignment. And her intention from every session, because she does a lot of these sessions, is to hold a safe space there and where they can effectively release and experience an impactful journey to uncover their potential. So really interesting stuff. I know a lot of people who listen to the podcast because we do focus on whole life success, and so this is people whether they're athletes or whether they're just people wanting to be able to kind of live more fully. Some of this is stuff that they've really been taking a look at recently. So first of all, thanks for joining us in a busy day, Shannon. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Well, it's interesting because I know you've kind of switched into kind of this as a specialization, I guess, in the last little while. But why don't you work us through a little bit about that journey and getting there? Because you have a physical therapy degree and kind of moving from that, and then kind of doing something that's more specific to that. Tell me kind of how did you get here?
Yeah, well, like so many of us, I'm continuing to evolve as I age. So yes, I was a physical therapist before I had kids. And then I was a stay-at-home mom with my two young kiddos for about 5 or 6 years. And at that point, I started getting really sick. I was putting everyone else first, everyone else's needs first, which I know a lot of us parents can relate to. And I was just neglecting my health and my well-being. And so as I kind of went down this healing journey of trying to recognize, why I was sick and knowing I didn't want to live that way, I discovered breath work.
Mhm.
And in that moment, I really realized that we can naturally heal ourselves. Of course, I had many doctors that I was working with, and I did a little bit of everything. But the breath work and connecting back to myself and remembering who I was seemed to have the most impact. And it was something that I could do on a daily basis without having to take a bunch of pills.
Yeah.
And so about a year or two after that, I, was on Instagram. And as you all know, Instagram knows what we're interested in and starts throwing things out at you. And somatic breath work came up, and there happened to have been a training right in my area that month. And so I went thinking it was just going to be something for me and my personal growth. And after leaving there, after the 4-day training, completely transformed, I thought I need to bring this to the masses. I can't just keep this for myself. And so at the time, my ex and I were running very high level masterminds in the entrepreneurial and real estate investing space.
Yeah.
And I thought, let me just try this with these entrepreneurs for free. I'm not going to charge anybody. I'm just going to come in and I'm going to do my thing. And let's just see what the results are. Because it was amazing for me, but I don't know. That could have just been because I was in a sick place and looking for healing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I did that session, that first session for those entrepreneurs, and the results were insane. And I was like, oh, we have something here.
Yeah.
So, that first time, I think maybe 20 people came. The second time it doubled. I had 40. And before you know it, I had 100, 150 people coming.
Oh,
I
wow.
heard about this. I want to try this.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just kind of, naturally taken off for me, which has been a blessing. But I've niched out in the entrepreneurial space,
Mm-hmm.
but there's a lot of people that work with high level athletes. There's a lot of people that work in addiction and recovery. That just happens to be my specific niche, is with entrepreneurs.
Yeah, yeah. Well, very interesting stuff. So tell us a little bit for those people who have little bits of kind of understanding with it. Maybe you can just tell us, what is somatic breathing? How does it work a little bit, just to give us an idea?
Sure. So somatic, when you think of the word soma meaning body. So we're using our breath to get connected back to our bodies. So throughout the day and throughout our lifetime, we're always in here, right? We're in our mind. Even when you think of mindset, and growth, we're always thinking, well, how can I think about this different? How can I do this different? Throughout our day, we're on a computer, we're on a phone, we're talking, we're thinking, we're listening. Everything is in the mind. And after years of that, we slowly start to disconnect from ourself, from our body. Okay. It's very normal, natural evolution of just being busy humans. All right. And so we're always doing instead of just being. And it doesn't take much to come back to the body. And you can oftentimes do that with the breath. So somatic breath work is using your breath to connect back to your body, but it's a very specific type of breath pattern that's used.
Hmm.
And so it's a hyperoxygenation in and out of the mouth for a very long period of time. So it's holotropic breath, if anyone has ever heard of that. A true holotropic breath session is like 3 or 4 hours.
Yeah.
Mine is not that long. So it's an hour total of breathing. The first 30 minutes being intense, and the last 30 minutes, it's kind of bringing it all home. So we're stimulating that nervous system. We're revving it up into that fight, flight, freeze, right? And then the last half, we're kind of calming it down, tapping into the parasympathetic system. Geez, I can't talk today. So we're practicing that up and down that is so common in our everyday life, right?
Yeah.
We're going to have stress. Stress is a natural thing, and there's good stress, there's bad stress.
Mhm.
But when we have those stressors, we need to know then how to recover and how to come back down. And so often, no matter who you are, a normal person, an athlete, an entrepreneur, a mom, a dad, we get stuck up here, right? We get stuck in that sympathetic nervous system state, and we don't know how to come down, or we don't take the time to come down back into the parasympathetic recovery state. And now there's just so much research around getting stuck in that sympathetic state is what's leading to so much disease and autoimmune dysfunction and anxiety and depression, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this particular type of breath work not only trains your nervous system that it's safe to come up, but it's safe to come back down. That's one part of it. Then the
Mhm.
other part of it is, as we're doing this breath, right, this intense breath in and out of the mouth,
Yeah.
we're clearing out stress and we're clearing out trauma.
Yeah.
Because when we're stimulated in that sympathetic state, different chemicals are released in our body, right? We have a physiological response. And those chemicals oftentimes don't get flushed out and they get stuck cellularly. And so if you ever heard of, things getting stuck at a cellular level, things getting stuck in your body, I saw it a lot as a physical therapist. Oftentimes the back pain or the shoulder pain was from stress, trauma, death, poor childhood, etc.
Yeah.
So we're clearing a lot of that out using our breath. That's the second part. And then the third part is we're rewiring the brain. So I use a lot of NLP commands where I'm trying to rework that pathway that's been carved so nicely in our brain, and it gets there so quickly, but we rework it to now where it's a new pathway, right? And so instead of thinking of our trauma or our stress or our childhood as something bad, right? We're now reworking it to maybe, you know, send love to that place or send acceptance to that place. And now our brain starts to think about things differently. So it's kind of a multifaceted, complicated, a complicated thing, but it is very, very powerful.
Well, and my understanding is that people can have very emotional kind of journeys through this too. Is that right?
Yeah.
And you know, where does that come from? How does it kind of come out in those sessions as well?
Yeah. So that's really fascinating. And if anyone goes to the Somatic Release Instagram and then they come to my class, they're terrified. They're like,
Yeah.
am I going to just sit here and cry the whole time? It's like, well, yes, you might, but there's a good chance that you won't. Okay. So what happens is as we start hyperoxygenating our body, the pH of our blood starts to change. Okay. And as the pH of our blood starts to change, things start changing physiologically, especially in the brain. And that frontal lobe, where we're always thinking, slows down. Okay. The executive functioning part of our brain slows down. And the subconscious, the primal part of our brain, opens up. Well, what lives in that primal part of our brain is our amygdala, and that is where emotions are housed and a lot of memories are housed. And our subconscious knows things that we don't even know we know. Okay. So 96% of the time we are acting at a subconscious level and we are behaving from a subconscious level and we don't even know it. Right.
Wow.
And we're not conscious of the subconscious. But when we are able to tap into that part of the brain using this breath work, oftentimes different emotions and feelings will come up that have been stuck cellularly for a really long time. And it can be something as simple as a child, you were told to be quiet, or you were told to don't cry or sit still, right? And so, of course, as a kid and even as an adult, we learn to not feel it anymore. I'm not going to feel that anymore. I get in trouble, or that's not socially acceptable, right? Where naturally, as beings, we are meant to feel. And so I open up that nice little part of your brain and then create the safe space for you to then feel all of those things and continually telling you you're human, it's okay to feel. And people are okay being vulnerable in that moment, and it just comes. Now it's a range of emotion. No, it's not always tears. There's a lot of times it's tears, but there's also anger and there's also happiness and joy and laughter. But you can't feel that until you've cleared out all the junk, until you've cleared out the sadness and the trauma and the stress and the grief and whatever it is that you're carrying, right?
Yeah.
You can't experience the high highs without experiencing the low lows. So I've noticed people that come back time after time again, that those first maybe 2 or 3 sessions can be pretty heavy. But then by like 4th, 5th, 6th time, they're like, this is amazing. This is the best I've ever felt, you know, and similar to therapy. It's like after a while, you've now worked through all your stuff and it's like, okay, I'm ready to show up as who I truly am because there's nothing else in the way.
Most people, when they come, then are they coming, like what kind of reasons drive them to come to a session like that? Is it because you talked about anxiety, you talk about maybe just other things? What is it that's driving people to go through this type of experience?
Everyone is different. I'll tell you, sometimes it's just because they happen to be in the mastermind and they showed up that day.
Yeah.
Right. And they didn't even know that they needed it. Sometimes it's someone has just lost someone or maybe lost someone years ago and just is really ready to process that grief and move forward. Some of them are having constant panic attacks and don't understand why, but they heard that this is great. Some of them, it's because their wife said, you're coming to this class with me. So, you know what I mean? So it's like every single person has a different reason. But the coolest thing about our bodies is that it doesn't matter why you come. It really doesn't even matter what your intention is for that class, because whatever your body needs in that moment is exactly what it's going to give you. It's like our bodies are so innately intelligent and we never tap into that intelligence But when you get that thinking part of your brain out of the way and you
Yeah.
stop thinking about it and you just feel and you feel into your body, it takes care of it. It really is fascinating to watch.
Yeah, and you also I don't know if this is just kind of part of what you do or whether that's part of the whole process. I know music plays a role in it as well. From like how does that connect in? Does it make a difference in how
Yes.
you work a session?
And
How does that work?
I've tried different playlists and there's sometimes where it just doesn't hit,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
So the music is you can use your own playlist. I like to use very tribally. It almost feels like it's taking us back to like ancient times.
Hmm.
And I think if you believe in epigenetics and you believe in that, our ancestors are still part of us,
Hmm.
right? It's like there's part of us on a cellular level that remembers that type of like drumming and tribal and culture, and it brings out that desire to connect. And so that's why I love doing the group sessions. One, because the music's loud, we're all in this room together. Someone over here is crying, someone over here is screaming, I'm giving commands. I mean, it's a lot going on,
Yeah,
but you feel like you're doing it in community, which when you go back to where our ancestors came from, we did everything in community.
yeah.
And now we do everything alone. And people even feel like they have to heal alone, right? Or maybe just one on one with a therapist. And it's like, no, we heal in community. And there's so much research now that you heal in the presence of an empathetic witness. And so that's where I come in, where I'm there, I'm witnessing you in your most vulnerable state as an empathetic witness, just appreciating your humanness,
Hmm.
you know?
Wow.
But yes, music is huge.
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
now, one of the things is your masterminds are probably a great example. You probably have people that are, business people or athletes who are very kind of almost black and white in their approach to things a little bit. And mindfulness has become something that I think is more a normal part of whether it's training or whether it's part of people's leadership kind of development. But do you still have like how do you get people past that maybe are those ones that just showed up in your session because they're there for something else? How do you get them past that where they see something maybe that's a little bit different than the norm for them?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think even when people think of breath work, automatically they think of like a yogi or a hippie or someone kind of woo woo, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So when I set up the container, I always not only want to set up a safe space, but I want to educate. And there's just so much science behind this particular type of breath work that I feel like the ones that are so skeptical, once they start hearing the science behind it, then you can kind of see their head cock, like the curiosity's there,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And then once I get their permission to go through with the session, and I have them lay down and close their eyes and put that eye mask on and the music comes on, it's like, I got you now,
yeah,
because I
yeah.
know every single person has an experience no matter what. Even if you don't try that hard, because you can
Mhm.
tell there's always the person laying there that's like kind of breathing, but kind of not. And
Yeah,
you're like, oh, they're just so scared. And I'll go up to them and I'll coach them and I'll, put my hand on their belly and just make sure they know like this, it's gonna be okay. But
yeah,
even those ones still have an experience because very rarely do we take the time to just lay down for an hour and be with ourselves. I
yeah.
mean, heck, just doing that, you don't even have to breathe.
Right.
I've had people come in and lay down on the mat waiting for the class to start and just start crying. Because it's like
Wow.
this busy mom hasn't even had 5 minutes to herself. And she's like, oh, this is amazing.
Yeah.
Right. So, yes, there's always a skeptic in the crowd, always. And they're my favorite one to get a testimonial from after, you
Yeah,
know? Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you actually you mentioned busy moms there as a good example. And we have a
Mhm.
lot of people like that listen. And I wonder, you're a good example of that. I'm sure you do some of this yourself. I mean, obviously it's
Yes.
part of your job, but maybe just how do you juggle those things where you've got to make sure that you create kind of that whole life wellness piece for
Yeah.
yourself, and like how do you juggle those things and balance them when you have children and all of those?
It's hard. I have two kids, they're teenagers, and one of them, ADHD, OCD is just like his dad. So, it's
Yeah,
like, I know he will rule the world one day, but good Lord, it's the hardest thing I've ever done.
yeah,
And yes, I have had to learn, one, to give myself grace, that it's okay to lose it sometimes, and two, to regulate my own nervous system so that I can show up as my best self for them and not always reacting, right?
yeah,
That's where the power is. When you can control your behavior in that moment of, oh my gosh, you've made me so mad.
yeah,
You can control that reactivity. It's so powerful, but that doesn't happen overnight. I mean, it's just no different than any other muscle in our body. You
mhm,
have to work it out. You have to practice. And so sometimes I'm not one that like has a time to lay there and meditate. That's
mhm,
not my personality.
yeah,
So a lot of times I do it in the car, and it's like tapping into yourself, tapping in, checking in with your body. Am I holding my breath? Are my shoulders up to here? Am I getting, upset at the driver in front of me? It's like, okay, shoulders back. Let's tap back into our heart. That's where the heart math comes in.
yeah,
We're tapping, once you tap into your heart space and you start focusing on that and you're breathing in love and just practice it. Even if you're not feeling love,
yeah.
you just practice breathing in that feeling of love. And it makes a difference. It really, really does, but it takes practice.
Yeah, yeah, and your practice is growing considerably right now. And as an entrepreneur yourself, are you a goal setter? Are you a write everything down kind of person? How does that work for you as an entrepreneur as well?
Yeah, I am a goal setter. I was an athlete growing up. I was a competitive soccer player. So I think our coaches just ingrained that in us that it's like, I remember it was a ladder. And so we had the ladder, and at the top of the ladder was that long-term goal, and all the
Yeah,
rungs on the ladder were these short-term goals to get there. And so I still do that. I don't necessarily have to write it down. I know scripting can be really, really powerful.
yeah,
Um, but I actually do a ton of imagery. And so if I have this goal, I feel myself, I see myself already there. And so
yeah,
I do a lot of that, like manifestation imagery of already being that, or already succeeding at that.
mhm,
And that really seems to work well for me. But I
yeah.
do know they say there's a ton of power in writing it down.
Mhm.
But again, all the extra minutes, there's no extra minutes.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, right? Is not everybody has that, and has that extra time, and kind of the other thing that goes with that is what you've been around lots of people, especially if you're doing masterminds and things like that. At times, you've been around a lot of people that probably have been mentors for you. Do you have specific people that kind of influenced you and continue to influence you that way?
Absolutely. I was very, very fortunate to be around a ton of successful entrepreneurs, just
Yeah,
because my ex-husband and I ran, all of those high-level masterminds. But specifically in this work, my mentor for somatic release,
yeah,
Stephen Jaggers, he's incredible, and just someone that I really look up to and aspire to be like in terms of his servitude. He's just everything he does is with that service in mind. And you can just really feel that from him. And, I'm an energy person. So it's like if I can feel your energy and knowing that you're doing things for the better good,
hmm,
I love being around people like that.
yeah, yeah,
And
very
not
cool.
all successful entrepreneurs have that energy, FYI.
That's absolutely true. Absolutely true. Sometimes the exact opposite in some ways.
Uh-huh.
Um, uh, so, if people at home are thinking, okay, because this has probably piqued a lot of people's interest, but even just in the power of your breath and things like that, and regardless of who's out there, I'm sure they've had an instance where maybe they're going to go to an interview, maybe they're at the start of a competition, things like that, and that anxiety level becomes, almost overwhelming. Are there
Yes.
things that you just say, like, if like a quick tip on can your breath affect that in
Yeah.
a positive way? And how do you do that?
Right. So, first of all, always remind yourself that anxiety and nervousness is not a bad thing. Okay. That can be a good thing. So, as soon as you start realizing that I'm going to use this to my advantage, okay, and you're shifting that mindset of how you're thinking about anxiety and how you're thinking about nerves, it's good. We need that, right? Otherwise,
Yeah.
you're just going to be kind of like this in your interview or your speech or whatever.
Mhm.
But the second thing is remembering that with our breath, we can tap into that parasympathetic nervous system. And the way you do that is by elongating your exhale. And so you're still going to feel nervous. Your heart's probably still going to be beating fast. However, you can control your breath by just counting in for 3 or 4. Sometimes when you're nervous, you can only get 3, and then out for at least double. So out for about 6 or 8. And so I put the tongue up to the roof of my mouth, to the palate. We're going in for 3 and then out of the mouth for 6 or 8. As you elongate that exhale, your body's naturally going to start to slow down. Again, you're still being nervous. That's okay. But you're telling your body you're safe and it's going to be okay. Right. And so you always can tap right back into that lengthened exhale. Let's say you get in that interview and now you're starting to feel like, oh, I'm holding my breath. It's like, don't forget, we're going to lengthen our exhale. And that will naturally tell yourself that you're trying to step into that slower part of your nervous system.
Wow, that's fantastic. And something that I think, people that have diagnosed anxiety have been taught as ways of being able to cope with some of that. So it is nice that people are realizing that that's applicable to everybody as well, right?
Yeah,
So,
it works. And it doesn't mean anxiety has to go away.
right.
I've had plenty of panic attacks. And once you become an observer of it and you're just watching it happen, it's not quite as scary.
Yeah.
But that's a
Yeah.
whole nother podcast.
Yeah, that's yeah. No, that's great. Well, and we'll have you back on to do that. So,
Cool.
um, well, okay. So tons of people, I'm sure, are like right away wanting to find out more, wanting to, obviously follow you and see some of kind of what you do and how to maybe tap into that. What are the best ways of doing that, Shannon?
Yeah. So you can go to my website, which is shannonsperber.com, or Instagram is if you want to follow me on Instagram and give me a message, Dr. Shannon Lee. And I would be happy to connect with you. And if you can't make it to Arizona, I have practitioners that I know all across the world, to be honest. And so I guarantee there's probably someone in your area that does this type of work.
Great. Well, and what we'll do is we'll tag both of those in the show notes as well. So people, if you didn't get that, just go into the show notes and you'll be able to be directed there right away. And either way, great content to take a look at and understand. Even if you're not in Arizona, you can learn lots just from seeing kind of your stuff as well, Shannon. So I know super busy, so I really appreciate you taking the time today. It was great, and I'm sure people took away tons today. I'm sure. So again, thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.